Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I know they're coming off a break, so it's possible that we may have a couple of people kind of wandering as we get started, but we'll just get moving through this. Got a lot of slides to go over today, so let's kind of run through things, but if you see something that you want to ask a question on, please go ahead. I'll do some questions at the end as well, so we can make it work however you want. Just some quick housekeeping. Please fill out evaluations. It is important for the conference that we know how people find the session so we can direct the content better. Okay, this session is implementing the world's largest Exalytics program. Okay, so hopefully that's the one that you wanted to see and you're in the right place. You'll notice something interesting in this picture. There are no clouds. This is, yes, exactly. This is a no cloud presentation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. A little bit about myself real quick. My name is Gary Crisci. I am the EPM Principal Technologist at General Electric, GE Digital specifically. I'm an Oracle ace in the BI and EPM space. I am a co-author for Developing S-Based Applications. If you've never read it, it's a really great book. Been doing this for a while in one form or another of finance and IT for about 20 years or so. And I am now also on the Auditing board. So please also, feel free to talk to me about the conference itself and the content you see here. And we hope that you're having a good time. My contact information is there if you want to follow my blog or if you want to follow me up on Twitter or just email me if you have any questions. Please feel free to. Additional sessions. If at the end of this you feel, I have not heard Gary speak enough, then you can come and follow me to some other sessions. We have the EPM platform Lunch and Learn. Whoops, let me go back to that. It's that one. Okay, so this is the top one here. This is right after this one. If you're interested in EPM platform, you can see we got a number of people speaking, a couple of Oracle aces, 3 ace directors, so we got a full house there. Later on after that, this afternoon, I'm going to be hosting another panel with some of my colleagues from GE, from the architecture team. And we can talk about a lot of stuff that's going on, not just Exalytics. GE is very tied into Oracle and the future of EPM. We work very closely with them. We can give you a lot of insight on 11.124 or anything else you want to come and just talk about. So please feel free to come to that session. Tomorrow, there is a session by Gary Adashek, another GE architect who's doing how to customize the Excel ribbon for SmartView. So that's a great session if you want to check that out. GE, obviously, it's a company that you've probably heard of, pretty large out there and in a lot of different areas, a lot of different industries, including our newest endeavor, which is GE Digital, where we're working towards industrial software. And so I got a quick little video here to kind of give you an idea of what that's all about.
Proud of you, son. GE, manufacturer. Well, that's why I dug this out for you. It's your grandpappy's hammer, and he would have wanted you to have it.
It meant a lot to him.
Yes, GE makes powerful machines, but I'll be writing the code that will allow those machines to share information with each other. I'll be changing the way the world...
You can't pick it up, can you? Go ahead. You can't lift the hammer.
It's okay, though. You're going to change the world.
Just pick up the hammer.
I don't need it.
Pick up the hammer. Pick it up.
Okay, so what Owen was talking about there is the GE Predix platform, and this is really built for the industrial Internet of Things, and I'm not going to get into this, but if you want to read about it, you can go to predix.com and see the information here in this slide. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is beyond just Exalytics. We're going to be talking about the EPM shared service that is at General Electric and what we're building out there. So EPM at GE, we are building the world's largest Exalytics platform. So we build it on engineered systems. These are hardware servers that Oracle has built specifically for EPM, and the software teams have optimized their processing to run better on these machines. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to tell you all about Exalytics and what we're doing. Okay, so before I go too much into just Exalytics, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about enterprise standards for a minute or two. For those of you who saw my presentation last year on DRM and what we were doing with an enterprise chart of account, enterprise standards are a program that we're running at GE. It's a set of consistent principles that we're applying across GE globally for key operational and financial transactions. This is to streamline our processes and make us perform simpler in various different verticals that we operate in. If you think about why, and you look over the years, and any large company, but particularly also GE, we see in our legacy environment, we're extremely complex. Lots of acquisitions, you bring new companies in, you adopt their processes, and then you have a very decentralized and things are very disjointed. A lot of complexity in that. So as we look towards the future, we want to maximize the use of our shared services so we can gain some scale and economy there. We want to be more responsive to our customers and the business in general. And we want to have some formalized policies that we can apply across the board so that everyone is kind of doing things in a similar way. So there are a number of enterprise standard programs. The one that we work in is what we call record to report. And this is basically, you could think of it as anything from the moment a financial transaction is incurred and entered somewhere, all the way through the process of where we report externally. So everything that falls in between those two bookends falls in this program. Okay? So what is the business case for building an EPM shared services and using engineered systems for it? So the first thing we looked at is, what was the risk? Somebody get the door? Oh, they went in the other door. Okay. Okay, so what is the risk of a commodity server platform? And so we looked at some things like patching, just something as simple as patching across such a large footprint, multiple operating systems, different skill sets, different support teams. We looked at challenges with adhering to Oracle's release schedule, right? I want to upgrade, but I can't because the hardware that I'm on is not sufficient to support the upgrade. User demands. We want to implement this new project. We're going to build a really big application. Well, we really don't have the processing power for that right now on this environment. So then what happens is your commodity environment becomes unstructured growth, right? You say, well, all right, I guess I'll go out and get another server to support this project. And now it's on a newer operating system, and you're maybe running different versions. So you have a lot of disjointed processes. So we look at three main drivers when we look at Exalytics. Performance, or just the global shared service in general, right? Not even just Exalytics, but what do we want out of it? Performance, centralization and standardization, and server footprint reduction. Now, looking at those three things, they are ranked in descending order. A lot of people don't think of that when they think of Exalytics. They say, oh, performance, 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 high throughput, high horsepower. If we had tried to sell this to our CIO and CFO as a pure performance play, we would not have gotten the funding for this project. Server footprint reduction. At our scale, it is actually cheaper to run Exalytics than it is to run commodity servers. And that's the trade-off and the return on investment that we get through this program. So we look at what were going to be the key benefit areas: increased productivity, right? Streamlining that backup process. Decrease downtimes, improve decision making because we do have that performance. We're going to get the information into people's hands quicker. Simplified installation and patching, tuning and optimization. Again, lower total cost of ownership, and what we consider future proofing because we're tied now to Oracle with their releases. We don't have to adopt every release, but with the engineered systems, the releases are very much fitted to the environment, and so it's easy for us to adopt them very quickly. So what does a global shared service look like, or how do you build it out, right? You got to look at your development teams, your support teams, and how you maintain the environment and how we simplify that so that we can do it at the scale that we need to do it. So one of the things is building a team in-house with the expertise. So there was a big push by GE, and it continues today, to bring in top EPM talent. We want to be consistent because if you're going to have this large of a footprint, you don't want server A and server B to look different. So we have a very consistent way as to how we do things, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Operation, a centralized 24/7 support team that knows this environment inside and out, knows everything that's going on with it and how to handle any issues that come up, regardless of which business it is. They know because certain things about the environment are consistent from as you hop across these different what we call zones, or what you would refer to as servers. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between servers and zones in a minute. Also, some things that we wanted to focus on was risk, right? We had a lot of intellectual property that would head out the door because we were heavily contractor dependent. We still have our key partners and we rely on them, and that's an important part of what we do. But we wanted to make sure that we had key people in place and that we had this centralized process so that we could keep that intelligence inside and knowledge and experience, and we could benefit from that. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure, right? So if you look at the evolution of what we've done, we started out with probably over 50 EPM environments scattered throughout GE at different various levels of business. Maybe somebody had an S-Base, somebody had an HFM, somebody had a planning and an S-Base, somebody had some OBI, somebody was doing some FDM. These were kind of scattered all over the place. Some were virtual, some were physical, and different versions, et cetera. So we took a run at this over the last couple of years where we had started to build out an internal cloud. So a lot of VMs, we spun up a lot of VMs, and we started bringing the businesses, come onto the platform so you don't have to have your platform, and we can get things running better. And then ultimately we made the investment in the engineered systems to really support, because we saw the VM was not going to be able to support it. It was just too much. And then we started getting into this too many servers, and everything's kind of all over the place. So the benefits of Exalytics, right? You've heard this if you've read any of the marketing material and stuff, right? Performance, consolidation, better lifecycle management, and better support. And that's a big one too. That's a really big one. We have one throat to choke. Okay, a lot of times you open an SR and, well, I don't know, maybe it's your SAN, call that vendor. Maybe it's the server. No. You know, when they say to me, oh, I think it's an operating system problem, I say, then turn around and tap the person on the shoulder sitting next to you that supports Solaris. So we have that, and there's a lot of value in that. So tell you a little bit about Exalytics. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I do got to get through a lot of stuff here. So this is kind of, there are two flavors of Exalytics, and most of you are probably familiar with the Linux version, which is the X series. We do have a few of those, but our investment is mostly in the T5s, which are a Solaris Spark system. So it runs on a Spark chip. 4 terabytes of RAM, 128 CPU cores. They multi-thread out to 1,024 threads. So to put that in perspective, if I'm in S-Base and I want to run a parallel calc, I could say calc parallel 1,024. I have 1,024 processors. It won't do anything. It'll just spin because it can't figure out how to handle that many threads. But it can be done. It just doesn't do much. So this is kind of the foundation, the way we lay this out. We have a storage tier, which are our Oracle RAC databases. And I have a call out here, soon to be Exadata. We did just go ahead and purchase Exadata machines to replace these. And that's a kind of a bigger program. Exadata just for EPM, probably hard to justify, but we're going to be moving a ton of RAC servers into Exadata. And again, that's where we talk about the scale of what we do and the cost benefit as you start to get up to those higher numbers. We also have ZFS machines. I'll talk about those in a minute. You have the base hardware, the Exalytics tier. Here it says there are 14 of these T5s, 3 of the X series. And then we carve them up into logical zones. If you're familiar with Solaris, you understand the concept of a zone. For everyone else, it's basically a VM. It's not exactly a VM because it's actually running more like it's bare metal, but it's a container. So what happens is when healthcare crashes their S-Base server, power and water doesn't feel it, even though they're on the same physical chassis because they're isolated. Each one has their own separate IP addresses and separate server names. So just to kind of give you a rundown of the counts, the T5s, 2 devs, 6 stage, 6 prod, 14, et cetera, it runs all the way down. Unfortunately, I do have some Windows dependencies due to EPMA. And so we did have to carry those in. So we got 18 physical Windows machines, and then there's 8 VMs as well. just to support EPMA, so that is what it is. But you can see the way we carved this up, and it winds up being altogether over 132 managed hosts, and that number's even gone up since then, where we had capacity and we've added additional zones. Okay, so those zones represent what you would consider a server. So I've taken 14 physical servers and I've turned them into over 130, 140 servers. That's the value, that's the scale. And as we cost those out, it pays for this environment. Because everyone says, why would you spend so much money? How could you spend so much money? This is cheaper. I'm not going to read this slide to you. If you're interested, this just has more details about the Exabox. The database tier, again, it was Oracle RAC, but we're in the process currently of moving it to Exadata. Okay. On the software side, we are running pretty much everything, with the exception of one or two modules or tools that Oracle sells in the EPM side. We have planning, Essbase, HFM, FDM, ARM, HFR, ODI, OBI, FDM, EE, EPMA, ARM, and FCM, which are currently on commodity. I'll talk about this a little bit later, coming into our Exalytics environment. So environment diagram, that's hard to read. It's just there for reference, but it shows you kind of the complexity, but this simplicity in this complexity. Because there are things like if you look at a host name, I can tell you just from the name of a server what data center it's in, what business it's for, what environment it is, what operating system it is, and what software is running on it, just by the name of the host. And that translates down to our DevOps team, so our support team knows these things as well. And then our naming conventions for our applications, when a ticket comes in, just by looking at the name of the application, they know where it resides. So there were things that we had the benefit of when you build from the ground up that we could get ahead of, and there was some real value in that. Here's a production one. ZFS, I mentioned that before. ZFS is a high-capacity storage device. We basically use it like a SAN. But in addition to that, it really has amazing ability to do DR from one data center to another. I can move a tremendous amount of data from one data center to another using the ZFS. So we have everything on the EXA. We have the ZFS mount points on all of our EXA. And then as users are working, their files are on there, and it's getting replicated down to another data center, so we minimize data loss in the event of a disaster. We also have certain global mounts, which I'll talk about in a little bit when we talk about patching. Okay, so that's the end of infrastructure. I'm going to keep going from there. Implementation. So let's talk a little bit. This is a business content session, right? So I don't want to be just talking technology, although, I mean, it's technology, but let's talk a little bit about the program and what happened here. So we worked with Oracle to build out this environment. I was unbelievably impressed at how well this went. You would think that this would be like catastrophic, putting in all these machines, installing all this software. 39 physical pieces of hardware, configured 132 hosts for the base project, over 400 URLs configured, all with a standard naming convention. Core team was pretty much about 20 people, GE, Oracle, and our partners. Project started out in January of 15. We had the dev environment in March, QA in April, May, and prod done by the end of June. So this worked out really well, and this is kind of the project timeline. You can see where we start up in February and we end up in June with the handover and all the documentation. And then we put our team together inside to be able to run this. And it worked. Like I said, I was pretty impressed. And I can say that because I wasn't part of the 20 that had to do it. So I can sit back from looking at it and say, this went very well. I'm going to call out specifically HFM 11124 here because this was a unique situation for us. HFM, for those of you who know HFM, you know that 11124 changed the underlying architecture of how it worked. They lost their Windows dependency, they simplified the way it was built, and they moved to Unix environments, Linux and Solaris. Okay, initially there were challenges, more than usual. And that's because when you go to Solaris, you also go to Spark. And they were used to Intel. So EPM had been written on Windows, Intel chips. These are Spark chips. I didn't realize that that was a big deal, but it's a very big deal because you actually write the code differently for Intel than you do for Spark. So there were some things that they had gotten most of it right, but there were some very basic things that didn't work. And this shows the partnership that GE has with Oracle. We would sit and we would go back and forth, we would install it, and we'd say, we have these problems, and they're right down the road, their HFM development team from our Fairfield, Connecticut headquarters. They're down in Stamford, Connecticut. And we basically said, order lunch, and we closed our laptops and we jumped in our cars and we went down there and we sat in conference rooms with them for a week. And, people came out from the back, people who usually don't work with customers, that was obvious. And, and they would just kind of, and they would just sit there and they'd look at it, okay, and we'd kind of work our way through things. And then we'd go back and they'd send us some dev builds and we'd test them out, and then we'd go back and work on it again. So we really developed this great rhythm with them to move a product through that initial, they always say don't adopt zero release, right? We had to. But we moved it through. And the reason is we need HFM on 11.124 on Exalytics to do what we need to do with HFM, the scale we're running it at. Okay. I think, 16 dimensions? 16-dimension HFM model for the global standard that all businesses will be adopting. So it's a pretty big HFM app. So let me talk to you a little bit about some successes and the migrations and the way we handle migrations, because we had kind of a couple different approaches to this, right? We want to get people off those existing legacy servers, and we also want people to build the new stuff for the enterprise standard program. So it's a little bit of a balance doing both. So when we engage with the businesses as a shared service, we look at what are you going to do and what are we going to do? And this kind of matrix kind of talks about what the business is responsible for versus what the shared service team is responsible for, and what we do in each phase: pre-work, kickoff, dev, QA, UAT, and production handoff and support. Okay, and so we work together and we partner with the businesses to do this. And we approach it like an internal consulting team is how we've tried to position ourselves. So we're there to help them. They still do a decent amount of work themselves. We provide the platform. They do their own development, but we have oversight and advisory roles with that, and we're gatekeepers as we move through certain toll gates to ensure that the apps are set up the right way. And that's important because what we found early on was if we just let them move through in the need for hitting project deadlines, they would jump into the next environment and then we would get a rash of tickets. Oh, Exalytics is terrible. HFM doesn't work. The users are miserable. And we traced it back to simple unit testing issues. Well, you never unit tested your app. You would have found this out if you had tested it before it moved to QA. So we put in more stringent toll gates. And now we get less problems when we move into UAT. So migration strategies, we basically have 3 migration strategies, and then the fourth one is the new development paradigm. But we look at lift and shift, just move the app as it is. Doesn't usually work. We have situations where we move applications into Exalytics and they slow down, and people are shocked. I thought it was supposed to be so much faster. Flip a couple levers, move a couple things around. Oh, now it's 60% faster than it was before. So there's a couple things that we do, and that's why I kind of have that boxed out in red: lift, shift, and tune. And that's really the key to what we have to do when we move these apps in. Sometimes we talk about a full redesign. Is it a good opportunity for you to redesign this app now that we're moving into this new environment? Maybe you should take that opportunity. None of them are really too happy about that. They don't want to redesign their apps. But with the enterprise standard program, we accept that most of those apps are going to go away over the next year or so. So new development's fine. So this was one of our migration projects, what we call our SDC, Supplemental Data Collection. This is a corporate planning app that we use to help support our external financial reporting. It took about 15 weeks to do. Lots of collaboration between the support team and the Exalytic shared service team. And we kind of moved all these things across. Here's some interesting things that you might like if you want to see, well, what was the performance benefit? You can see here things like calcs that went from 13 minutes to 5 minutes, overall processing from 15 minutes to 6 minutes, backup processes that went from 120 minutes down to 20 minutes because of the speed at which we can export and reconsolidate, etc. So lots of good improvements there. I'm going to talk about this graph actually on the next slide. What you can see here is this is tied to like data load timings. We've seen it also with calcs. And what the top line represents is the legacy, the quarter before we moved. And the bottom line, the orange line, is the Exalytics one. And what's really interesting about this is not just that it's faster, but it's flat and it's consistent. And what you saw in the legacy environment was that it was kind of inconsistent. And that amounts to fragmentation, because in Exalytics 11.124, S-Space has in-place block writing, so we get much less fragmentation. So this is big because it's not only faster, but consistency is really useful, because during the close, when it's 10 o'clock at night and that FP&A analyst or controller is exhausted and they kick off that console, and they go, I don't know if I'm going to be here for 5 minutes or if I'm going to be here for 30 minutes waiting for this to finish. Now they know. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback because of that. Okay. This just shows kind of over the years the performance for this. They had actually done some optimizations as they came out of that legacy environment. But then once we got to Exa, you can see the big drop off there and how things really, really sped up. And just, like I said, some really positive feedback from the customer, impressive speed, new system very fast, personally saved 40% of my time tonight. That's a real value. You make people happy when you do something like that. When you say you can go home early and put your kids to bed because this system runs faster, that's important. Another project we did, CCL Hyperion. This is our corporate consolidated ledger, so it's basically a really big ASO cube. It's got a planning app that's also tied to it with partitioning. Same thing, moved through it. We did this one in about 10 weeks. Didn't see as drastic improvement because ASO by nature is already pretty darn fast. So you definitely see better improvements on the BSO side than on the ASO side. But we do see benefits to ASO as well, and they did. And it took a little tweaking. These were cases where we moved it, and the first thing they came back to us was they said it slowed down. And go in, change a couple things. And some of that wasn't just Exa, though. And that's one of, as I talk later on a little bit about lessons learned, doing a major hardware and software upgrade at the same time introduces some interesting challenges. Because I would be with our CIO talking informally, and I'm very frustrated with Exalytics. Well, Exalytics is fine. The software may have a bug or change something that a legacy application we moved into the environment didn't anticipate. And we have to do it. He didn't want to hear that, okay? So I didn't say it to him very often because it wasn't well received. As far as he was concerned, it was Exalytics. But there's some challenges in that when you do these things together. Who do you blame? So this is just some processing time comparisons, but you can see basically 63 minutes versus 47 minutes. So we picked up some time there. This was one of the migrations we did for transportation. Really, I just have a call out here, which was some interesting things. These legacy queries right here are tied to OBI dashboards, okay? And you had dashboards that were taking 100, 200, 80 seconds to render. That 200 seconds went down to 20 seconds, okay? 80 to 4. That's a very big difference when you talk about an end user experience when they're waiting for their dashboard to open. Yes?
What version of the database are you?
Version of which database? Oracle's 12c. Okay.
Did you use pluggable databases or just the plain version of the database?
Joe, regular racks, right?
We have separate containers of databases, but it's
So the question was, are they pluggable databases? And the response was, no, they're not. They're separate in separate containers, but they're not pluggable ones. Okay.
you use timestamp in a process, timestamp database.
I'm sorry?
Is there a timestamp database involved?
We are not using a times 10 database in this environment. On our X series boxes where we have OBI installed, times 10 is there by default. We haven't done a lot of work with that right now, but it is there. So I can't speak too much to times 10 at this time. Okay, so new development. Enterprise Standard HFM. So this is really kind of the reason that pushed everything over the edge for us to invest in this platform. We're building out a centralized global standard HFM application. And again, if you understand the way we're approaching a global standard chart of accounts for all of our ERPs, right? So there's a lot of simplification going on at GE. We had over 400 ERPs. We are on target to be at 31 strategic ERPs by the end of 2017, all running on the same chart. So with that, we then say, well, now we can have a global consolidation platform. Now, each business, you got to remember, each one of these GE businesses, when I showed you, it had the squares of all the GE businesses, each one of those businesses is a Fortune 50 on their own. So we're trying to wrangle this together and say, we want you to be consistent in the way you do things. And they have scale to them. So we've done things where we've said, okay, we split the chart and we say this side is governed and it must be the way corporate needs to report externally. So everyone will use the same accounts. Everyone will use the same legal entities. But then when we get down to the business, we give them some flexibility on cost centers, projects, product lines, things like that, because those are very individual to each business. But the block itself is consistent. Okay? So this HFM build, consistent data integration processes, they all talk to each other. Business HFM feeds up to corporate HFM, et cetera. Standard business rules with slight modifications for each business. Standard chart of accounts. When we look at planning, we didn't get as specific with planning because planning is definitely you plan very differently for light bulbs than you do for nuclear reactors. So we had to give people some flexibility there, right? So we give them some guidelines, and there are definitely platform guidelines, and then there are development guidelines. Must leverage that ES chart, has to be integrated with HFM, but they do have more flexibility in how they plan. ASO reporting cubes. This has become kind of a staple in the way we do things. So we have these HFM apps, we have these planning apps, and then we have these really large ASO reporting cubes for each business that show basically all their numbers. And there's data FDMEE and ODI integrations to pull everything from HFM planning into ASO. Again, it leverages the ES chart. And these are very, very performant. We're really moving as fast as you probably can. Question?
Just a general question. So you said you have large ASO cubes on the Exalytics platform, right? Do you, from an operational perspective, do you do like daily loads and do you like aggregate your cubes?
Yeah. And different businesses have a different approach to that, but yes, we do slight pre-aggregations. They are loaded. I don't want to say trickle feed, but almost trickle feed. Incremental slices are built throughout the day, and then they're merged, and the consolidations are updated. So yeah, it's a continuous process.
But it's not like a complete pack of the cube, like you do one slice.
When we do the base load, we'll do the aggregation, but we usually will do a very small one, just so that the initial retrieves are very respondent, and we found that that's pretty much good enough. And that's some things that we had to play with, because when we first brought it into EXA, the cubes were not being aggregated at all, and they were a little bit faster. They have changed some things in the 11124 code line for ASO that make it perform a little bit differently. But with just a slight aggregation, we were able to excel way beyond the commodity servers. So again, that's that task of balancing and working with Oracle Dev. What did you do? Why did it slow down? Well, we're trying to make it so it supports bigger cubes, but we didn't realize that it was going to slow this down, so we have to go back and do that. So by now we're on 11124.010, pretty stable, pretty good.
Because we had that issue among the businesses. Our IT told us that your cubes are going to take like 10 hours to aggregate, so it's like a one-day lag.
Yeah.
So then they came up with like, because 11124 has some bug, they said you're going to do one slice. So I'm just wondering, like, with the new versions, that one slice, is it required at all, or like you can just do daily loads? And then
So the question is if merge slices are required. My experience has been that it's not required, but a lot of times it helps. You should not have an ASO cube aggregating for 10 hours. Something's not right. So we can talk about that after. DevOps, so we talk about the way we support this environment, right? So we have a 24/7 centralized support team, one global support team for all of EPM, standard backup and lifecycle management processes, routine maintenance, segregation of duties is a big one. And this is something that, as you start to put things in place and as we bring the businesses in-house, you start to realize how fragile their environments were, because we start getting requests, so-and-so needs access to production. Well, so-and-so's a developer who already has access to non-production. Well, yeah, but he needs to be in production because he's going to support production. Well, that doesn't work. You have to have segregation of duties. Well, we don't have enough people to support that. Okay, well, then we just exposed a big problem, because you guys have been running and not adhering to segregation of duties because you don't have the proper head counts. And then, so how does the corporate team help support you in that process? Standardized security model has been huge. This is something, so right out of the gate, we tell people, no native users at all. The only native user in the entire environment is admin. Otherwise, no native users. No individuals are provisioned to anything. Only groups. LDAP groups are provisioned, and users have to be put into an LDAP group, which is handled by the corporate identity management system, right? I don't want that in EPM. I have a great identity management system that handles 300,000 GE employees. Control your groups that way. Now, we remove that from our process, our responsibility, right? Because I go, who's the app owner? Okay, you manage the group. Don't send me a ticket when somebody needs access. You go into identity management and add them to the group. You can do that through a web browser interface. Nothing to do with EPM. Set up your app, define your security roles, create your groups, we'll provision them, and then we're done. So we don't let anybody else do provisioning. We're the only ones that do provisioning. That's centralized. But we give them the management of it. And centralized risk management, right? We talk about things, people are shocked. Every time we bring a new team into the environment, within a few days I get an email, what's the root password? You can't have that. But I have to have that. How am I going to do my job? Well, I don't, let's talk about that. What are your requirements? Because, there are other people in this environment. And we're and I know I said I wouldn't use the C word, but, we're preparing people to move to the cloud. And you're going to have those kind of constraints there. You're not going to have root access in the cloud. So let's start to think about how we do things today without that access. So quick support team overview. Right now, about 23 total heads, 24/7. We have them staffed in Mexico, India, and the United States. Only level 3 and 4 support staff open tickets with Oracle. So we try to filter it out internally before we go and open an SR with Oracle. Make sure we have a lot of expertise in-house. Make sure that we're cleaning it up and that it's an actual problem before we go to them. These kind of just give you, these are some stats about how things are broken up, the different counts and stuff. This extends beyond, just to clarify, because these numbers might contradict some of the other numbers I had a few minutes ago. This global support team is still also servicing that R2R virtual environment. So that's why you'll see more servers here. And they have to, as we wind those down, it'll just be the EXA ones.
That's 73 DRM servers.
Yeah. Yeah, so we built a DRM platform as a service as well. Every business has 3 servers, and then there's a lot more. What's that? Anu? What? Yes, all the data. That includes all the database servers as well. So yes, a lot of DRM servers. Our DRM implementation is huge. Yeah. Yeah. So that enterprise standard chart across all these companies is pretty massive.
So the DRM, so we talk about is only for production environment, not count QA in the dev, right?
No, that count of DRM servers includes non-production as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's total DRM. Yeah, and obviously those are Windows, right? Would have loved it to put DRM on Exalytics. Can't happen. DRM is Windows only product. It's one of the few that are left, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change because they're going to create data management cloud service. And I don't think there's any appetite to rewrite DRM. So what do? Daily, monitor daily jobs, scan logs, verify backups, log rotations. They're responsible for our LCM. So when someone wants to move from one environment to the other, they put in a ticket. Because part of the things that we realize with LCM is that in order to import an LCM, you need to have provisioning rights. But you remember before I said about risk management and about provisioning and security, we don't give people provisioning rights. So they can do an LCM export, everything that they want to move to the next environment, and then they submit a ticket. It goes through the proper toll gates. Somebody on the DevOps team picks up the LCM and imports it for them, and then they go into the environment and continue working. You could argue that that's a little, you're adding a little bit of complexity, but that little bit of control goes a long way in reducing problems when things don't work the way they're supposed to and being able to trace it back to why. Again, patching, capacity planning, all different security audits, all those kind of things. I already talked about the security model, so I won't go through that again, but also standard naming conventions, which was actually very important. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, depending on the scale and how you're doing groups, how big your LDAP is, but in Hyperion Shared Services, if you have a really large LDAP, Hyperion Shared Services will crash. So what you have to do is you have to filter it down, and you have to say, I only want these groups or these parts of the LDAP tree, etc. And in our legacy environment, they actually had this problem where they had explicitly named the groups in the LDAP filter. And so what would happen is during the close, someone would say, something happened somewhere and we need to create another group, we need to add something, and you needed an outage. We had to take out the entire EPM environment to get that one new group into that LDAP filter. In our environment, we started right off from the beginning and we said all groups will begin with a specific prefix. And then in shared services, we just said our filter is that prefix. If you ever create a group that doesn't have that prefix, don't call us, it's not going to work. Problem solved. No outages for adding new security groups. Okay, so let's talk about some cool stuff that we've done. Knowledge management, Confluence. I'm going to talk about some things that might be a little bit non-Oracle, right? This is a business content meeting session, so let's talk about some other things that we do. Confluence Wiki. This has been huge for us. In this wiki site, any user can go in, they can find any URL they need, they can find any IP address, they can find any policy, they can find troubleshooting articles, they can find contact information for who controls what and what's where. Everything about the environment is documented and it's a living searchable document. This is something that I have been a big proponent of at GE. I started it with the DRM program. I hated going to a new company and saying, where's the documentation? And they would send me a link to a folder, and in it were 500 Word and Excel documents. And somewhere in that one of those documents was what I needed to know. And I would just close the folder. And say, all right, I got to go find somebody who knows because I'm not doing this. So this is a living document, and it's a great way to approach knowledge management. So I suggest if that's something that you're interested in, that you look at it. Not necessarily just Confluence, just wiki concepts in general. Because the benefit there is I'm not the only one updating it. When I say it's living, I remember with the DRM wiki, I knew that it had started working when I was the lead for the program, and I went onto the site and I learned something about the program I didn't know. And I said, this is now working. It's taken on a life of its own. People are contributing content. It's not just me. DCLI, Distributed Command Line Interface. This is unbelievably powerful. I said we have 132 zones, right? So carve up 1/3 of that, just whatever for dev, QA, and prod. When we do patching, not me, but we can patch our entire dev environment in about an hour or two. Because I deploy that patch once, I script it, and then I use DCLI and I blast it out to every Exalytic zone at the same time. They all patch at the same time. So one common outage for a couple hours, all EPM environments come down. And then, come on. Okay, we still good? Okay. I don't know if that was showing up on there or showing up on mine. So this is just massive. And it also allows us to deploy and remove patches. So we're really on the bleeding edge. We have to be right now because of what we're doing. So Oracle will drop a patch and we'll apply it maybe in one of our, so we have lab zones as well. I keep talking about dev, QA, and prod. We also have lab zones. We'll apply it there. Looks okay. We'll do a mass deployment in dev for our dev schedule. It takes a couple hours. We'll get a call a few days later. We've run into a bug that is a showstopper. Look at it. Yeah, you're right. That is a showstopper. A couple hours later, that patch is removed from every environment in GE because of this utility. So really, really powerful stuff. What happened now? That's not good. Let's see. Okay. SmartView shared connections. I don't know if any of you know this, but for those of you who work with SmartView, you know you put in a URL for shared connections. It's usually based on one environment, and you may see a couple different products there. SmartView also allows you to create an XML file that you could read from, and you can put in all your different products and environments. We can then take that one step further, and we can host that XML file on a web server. So now I give all users at GE one URL, and they can access any Exalytics environment they need, whether it's dev, QA, or prod, all in a drop-down. And they just scroll to their business unit, which environment they want, which product. Really good stuff. Automic. So Automic is a vendor. They do automation and orchestration. I'm not going to get in real deep because I have a few slides on them. But basically what we needed was a really good scheduler, but more than a scheduler. We needed to be able to orchestrate. If any of you are familiar with AppWorks, if you haven't heard of Automic, so Automic bought AppWorks. And one of the key things that we did with them was we said, well, you guys are great in ERP and in server management because GE are used throughout GE. But one area where you really don't have any strength is in EPM. And we were looking at another tool that was very strong in EPM, but we didn't feel comfortable with the vendor. So we said, we'll go all in on Automic, but you have to build EPM adapters, and we'll partner with you to do that. And they said, okay. So right now, today, the HFM adapter is general release. We have an FDMEE and EPMA in beta that we're working on with them, and SBase and planning are in development. And what these adapters do is they allow you to really kind of go into your workflow and not have to write custom scripts. So if you think about it from like an SBase perspective, you would not have to create a Maxell script. It's just point and click, drop down. I want to do a login. I want to do a data load. I want to do a calculation. And you can pass variables in the scripts. So it's a very, very powerful tool. And if you think about HFM, which doesn't have a scripting language, they've scripted the API for you. So you don't have to write an API now. So we get a lot of value out of this. Again, script-free point-and-click interface. And these are some of the functions that it can do today. So you can see allocate, calculate, copy data, load rules, load security, extract rules, all point-and-click in a workflow. We can tie it together with our ERP. So data is coming in from an ERP. We can watch for files that are being delivered. We can scan database tables for activity triggers, and then we can manage these workflows. And we can feed it back through email, and there's web dashboards here, right? We can monitor the workflow, and I can even run this on my phone. So if I get a email that a job failed, I can connect on my phone, look at it, and maybe I see that it was something that was kind of arbitrary, and I kick it off again from the phone, and it continues on its way. So really powerful stuff. Exalytics, I don't know how many of you may have been in the presentation before this one. Exalytics is another partner that we have. They have basically its application performance management suite. And so we can monitor a lot of the activity that's going on in the environment. We can monitor logs. We can monitor user activity. We can do different things around like here. Auditing. So someone changed a config setting. How many times has that burned you? Right? You go in, and it turns out we had worked on HFM, we had worked very closely with the Oracle SEAL team and with the dev team, and we came up with a very specific configuration for our applications in the settings. Now, unfortunately, because of the way HFM provisioning works, I had to give some of my developers more access than I would have liked to. They were able to change these settings. He said, don't do it. Most of them didn't. Not all of them. So all of a sudden the app's not performing right. And we're running around, why is this app not working? Why is this app not working? After enough investigation, so-and-so changed this configuration setting because he thought it would work better if he did this. Okay, well enough, that's fine. With Exalytics, we get audit reports that show us when those kind of things are happening on a regular basis. We can even get alerts. So now I don't have to go through that whole cycle of investigating what happened, why did it happen. So we talk about here, what do we use it for, right? Monitoring at the infrastructure application level, keep servers and the environment synchronized, etc. Track changes, that's a big one, tracking the changes, because man, that leads to trouble. Somebody changed something, I thought it was a good idea, and I just didn't realize what it was going to do because it didn't show itself for 3 or 4 days. And then you can spend hours, just hours, trying to figure that out. But if you have an audit log that shows you exactly what changed, real easy to go hone in on where the problems might be. Okay, so some lessons learned. A couple slides that I just throw in because I like to just kind of reflect back with people some things that I learned over the last year or some information that I thought was worth sharing. So, as my friend Shia there says, do it, just do it, right? Very angrily. I don't know if you've ever seen that video. It's hysterical. But bite off more than you can chew, then chew it, or plan more than you can do, and then do it. If I really looked at what we were doing, if all of us, and I'm looking at the guys in here in blue shirts and the women in here in blue shirts who work at GE, if we really thought about what we were doing and really said, do we want to do it? We all would have said no, right? Because it was just massive. And there were problems. And like I said, doing a major hardware upgrade and a major software upgrade, sometimes you do just have to do things. Plan, be ready when things don't go right, because your plans don't always go right. But don't just wait for that perfect opportunity, because you're never going to have it. It's never going to be the perfect time to do it. Lesson 2. In order to get from what was to what will be, you must go through what is. Every condition in your life right now, good or bad, is the end product of the process that preceded it. The world is not a place of chaos, even though it may seem like it. There's a logical collection of individual systems. Each one looked at by itself makes sense. If you can figure out how to break those systems apart and see them for what they are, you get a tremendous amount of control and empowerment from that. So when there are steps to be taken, take them now. And when I talk about that with individual systems, I think back to when I bring an application into the environment and I look at something that the developer did and I go, that is just absurd. Why in the world would you have done that? That's not the right mindset. There was a reason it was done. Even if it was done with some lack of skill, there was a reason that it was done that at the time was valid and is probably still valid. And you just may not be aware of it. It's very easy to sit up on your perch and look down and say, you did that wrong. And then you unwind it. How many times have I gotten bit going in and saying, well, I'll just change that. And then a week later, or a quarter later, this report doesn't work right anymore. You go and you look and you go, that crazy thing that I threw out was what made this report work. You could argue maybe there was a better way to do it, but that individual system worked. It made sense. But I didn't see it for what it was because I was just looking at the bigger system. So try to, prune those things out and you'll get some real value out of that. So what's next? I got to move this along. We're almost done. We are implementing Exadata. For those of you who don't know what it is, high-capacity engineered Oracle database servers. Okay, same logic for Exalytics, right? We're going to get rid of a lot of Oracle RAC database servers for an Exadata appliance. At the end of the day, Exadata doesn't do that much for EPM. EPM's not really written in a way that it is so relationally database intensive, even HFM. But it still makes sense because of the number of servers we're going to get rid of, the more centralized support, and the standardization that we're going to have by being on that environment. So I talked to you a little bit about ARM and FCM. We just recently bought more Exalytic servers, 3 more. And our CIO said to us beforehand, I'm not buying any more Exalytic servers. You people are crazy. Why would I buy Exalytic servers, especially for ARM and FCM? Oracle has specifically said you will get no performance improvement for ARM and FCM on Exalytics. It's supported, it will run, but you will get no benefit. We said, okay. We said, well, look at these projection plans. These are the number of reconciliations, the number of users. Look at the size of the database growth. For FCM, look at what you're doing. Right? We said we could build out this environment. We can have an Exadata storage tier, a few T5s, one in dev, one in QA, and one in prod. And we can build dedicated ARM and FCM zones. And then we went to the numbers. And we said, at the end of the day, the support and build out for Exalytics is going to be cheaper and fewer servers. I'm going to have 3 T5s instead of 20 total servers to support the environment. Do you still not want to buy Exalytics? Oh, and by the way, those commodity servers are going to be supported by another team. And when you call Oracle for support, they're going to question, is it your hardware? So one throat to choke, same global support team that you've built with all these EPM experts that you trust instead of the standard support in the regular GE data center. And it's cheaper. Do you still not want to buy Exalytics? And he shook his head and he smiled and he said, I guess we're buying more Exalytics boxes. And so at the right scale, it makes sense. So that's the end of what I had to talk to you about today. I think I finished up right about on time, so that's good. So I got a couple minutes for any questions. And by the way, before I just want to mention one thing real quick. For the first time, I've given a lot of presentations. For the first time, my wife is in the audience. She came in today and she's watching. No matter what you thought of this presentation, when we are done, you need to really cheer loudly. Okay, questions?
The T5, were you guys worried all about, are they going to continue to develop on T5s, continue forward? I heard that they might be going away from that.
Yeah, so the question is, are we concerned about what the future is for the T5? A little bit. At the time, you know, but it's what you run into in technology in general, right? You never know what's coming next. Obviously, we do need to be thinking about how we get out of our own data centers anyway. So this is a stepping stone to that. When we come up to a hardware refresh, we'll have to figure out what comes next. There are other servers that, and we are in constant talks with them. You know, they have the M7 now, superclusters, different things that all they'd have to do is certify and put the Exalytics package on them. But it does beg the question of Solaris. And I'll tell you right now, if you're not at the scale, you want to go Exalytics, but you don't need the tremendous scale, by all means get an X series. EPM runs better on Linux. We got it running pretty good on Solaris because we sat down with them and we said, you're going to, you know, we invested all this money in this, you're going to make it work. And they did. But it didn't right out of the gate. That's Spark Intel stuff. So, next question. Yes.
Which one of the Exalytics? One of the first one we have the X2-4.
Mm-hmm.
I see that you two also have the X2-4, and then your recent works, I see that you already went everything with the T.
Yep.
Do you see anything with the Linux? Because I'm making a decision to one more for my new ones. Whether I need to go X series and the T series, or make an option. But now you have seen both.
Yes.
What do you think? X is the
EPM runs better on Linux, but it runs fine on Solaris now. Linux is easier to support unless you have Solaris skill set and you have a reason for it. Only get a T5 if you need it for the kind of use case that we're talking about, where you want to carve them up. The X series boxes are a little bit harder to carve up, and you would need more. If we had tried to do this with the X boxes, we would have needed a lot of them. You just didn't have the multi-threading and the number of CPUs that you have on a T5. So it depends on your scale. Thanks. Yes?
We recently went live with our Exalytics program. One issue what we faced is our data load times from a Oracle table have gone down by 40%. So just wanted to ask if you see such behavior.
I want to see if I got the question. You're saying that your data movements from Oracle database into the Exalytics environment have gone down by 40%?
Yeah, so we are loading data
Yep.
So that gone down by 40%.
I would first I would move the data onto Exalytics in the form of a text file and upload it and confirm if your problem is S-space related or if it's in the data movement. I suspect it's probably in the way they networked your machine in, and somewhere between that Oracle database and that Exalytics server, your pipes are not moving the data as fast as they should. But I'm guessing. It would be hard to say. You'd have to look at it. No, we have not seen that.
Yeah, we work with Oracle, but not
Mhm.
really.
I'll tell you now. Actually, we did see that. And what we determined very early on, immediately, it was a GE problem. We had, because of the way we had brought this in, some of the commodity databases were in different data centers. And if we tried to move a data load from one data center to another data center, brutal. Get them in the same data center, and it was instant. So that was a GE problem in how we move data across data centers and the pipes that we use to do that. So I don't know, that may be something you want to look at. Where did you put your Exalytics box? Where was your commodity box? And did you change something there in terms of geography? And then you need to look at that as well.
As you're moving to Exalytic, are you guys going to fit a band to load some?
Yes, yeah. So we will be going to full InfiniBand. It always irked me that we had dark InfiniBand cards that weren't being used. So I'm very happy that we're going to Exadata and now lighting those up and using InfiniBand. For those of you who don't know, InfiniBand are fiber optic cards that come in these Exa appliances. The cards and the controller heads are actually not that expensive, but man, those cables can be. So, but they move data very, very, very fast. What are they, 30 gigabit? 30 gigabit movement. So right now, the best we could do is 10 gig ports on our network switches. So this is going to be a nice bump for moving data. Question?
Did you use Oracle Virtual Machine for virtualization?
No, because with Solaris, we use the concept of zones and carving things up. We did not go with virtual. As a matter of fact, OVM was one of the reasons we did not go with the X series boxes, because we didn't feel we could carve them up the way we needed to. And we felt that the zones represented more of a bare metal feel, and the performance that you get, you don't get that virtualization hit when you run it as a Solaris zone. So it was better for us.
So how many zones you have in one server?
Joe, what's the most zones we have in one server?
7.
7? Yeah.
So it's something like it's 7 OVMs. Didn't come.
Yeah, except it's not OVM, but yes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It runs like 7 OVMs, but Solaris just handles it differently than Linux does.
For the X, they usually don't recommend for the production having OVMs.
Yep. All right. I'll leave you with this last one.
I heard you got a job as a developer.
It's official. I work for GE.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guys, I'll be writing a new language for machines, so planes, trains, even hospitals can work better. This is,
Sorry, I was trying to put it away.
got it on the cake.
So you're gonna work on a train?
Not on a train, on trains.
You're not gonna develop stuff anymore?
No, I am. Do you know what GE is? This is huge for me. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, man.
Oh, yeah. No, you should be. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's really great.
Gonna be a pilot? Fly a plane?
Okay. Thank you. There you go. Thanks.